Okay, good morning everyone. We'll get started. So welcome to today's webinar. Just a little bit of housekeeping for those of you that are there. We've got a recording of the webinar happening, so we'll distribute that to you via email once we've finished. And also we won't be taking questions on the webinar, but there is an option through GoToWebinar to ask questions online, so we'll take those questions and answer them after the webinar. So welcome today. Today's webinar is about student recruitment, specifically focused on organisations that deliver education to international students, so CRICOS organisations, but this is also relevant to those that also do domestic RTO-based delivery as well. Just as an introduction, we've got myself, Ben Stewart, so I am the CTO of the CRM space here at Fusion 5 with over 20 years working in the education and training sector. And we've also got Sven Martin, who's the Executive Director of our student management system at Fusion 5, and he also has been working with student and training management solutions for just on 20 years now. So Sven and I will both be presenting to you today some content to you that includes, looking at the challenges and constraints that education providers experience today, talking about what we think is needed and our observations about what we understand is needed by organisations, also looking at some real life examples. So we've actually got a case study for you to look at here, and then going through and just giving you a quick showcase of our student management solution. Just to give you a bit of a taste for the education customers that we currently have at Fusion 5. So as you can see, there's a wide range of organisations that use Fusion 5 services to deliver education and training, and across a wide range of different sorts of functionality as well. Today, we're going to be specifically focused on the top two, which is student training management and portal and CRM functionality. But as an organisation, we've got a lot of experience delivering across the entire education and training workflow and the whole student life cycle. Most recently, we've had Necker Education and Careers in Victoria, which is a domestic training organisation, but we're going to talk to you today also about Aspire 2, which is one of our larger customers using our student management solution. So, we're drawing on this experience that we have across the entire education sector. So we hope to sort of share some of this with you. And this is what's really shaped the product that we're going to talk to you about today. So I'm going to talk about some of the challenges and constraints. So one of the big things that we've noticed over the last few years is that the expectations of students and staff and your key stakeholders, so your agents as well, is that a lot has changed in the last 3 or 4 years, and we talk about what we refer to as the millennial age. And what that is really just a change in experience that people are expecting when they deal with technology or systems or just in their day-to-day lives. So as you know, when we're talking about, many of you would have used Netflix or purchased products online or used Facebook and things like that. There's a lot of suggestions and things that come up to help you sort of navigate what is a vast amount of information. And Netflix is probably the best example, where you sit down and when you switch it on, you get recommendations that come up. And a lot of the time that's based on data that sits inside a system that they analyze in order to try and predict what you actually want. And the user experience is getting a lot sharper as well. So when we're using things like chatbots, we're actually talking to devices now to get information out. Some of the visualization and the robotics and mobility platforms mean that the bar is set really high from a student engagement perspective, but also when it comes to our staff as well. So when staff sit down and want to actually do a job and enjoy it and do it well, they have this experience outside the workplace of being able to use systems quickly and easily that actually serve information to them that's relevant. And it can sometimes be a bit of a letdown with staff when they meet some challenges and it's not consistent with the experience that they have actually in the real world. So today, what I'm going to talk to you about is some of the constraints that we have in not being able to deliver those things. So one of the biggest problems that we found with our customers in the education and training sector is that they have multiple systems. They have a CRM system, they have a student management system, they may have an accommodation system, they may have a library system, and all of these systems are quite separate, and the data in those systems actually becomes disconnected, which is a real challenge for the end user. So when someone rings up with a query, what happens a lot of the time is you'll have the person on the end of the phone writing down what the query is, and then having to get back to the student or back to their agent or back to the prospective student at a later time, because what they actually have to do is navigate across multiple systems, which makes it really hard to manage that student experience. When we compare it to what people experience outside the education space, and things like Netflix, it's really hard to create a student experience that's consistent with what they experience in the outside world. The other big challenge that they have is, changing those systems, moving, sometimes even just moving to the latest version of those systems can be expensive to change, and actually a hard process to change. And the lack of agility inside a lot of the systems that are on the market today also create a big challenge for organisations, because one of the key things in today's market is knowing and responding to different market pressures or opportunities that exist out in the market. And if your system lacks the agility for you to meet those new demands or to rise up to those new opportunities, we're finding that really constrains organisations in their ability to be really leaders in the market. One of the other things organisations are trying to grapple with is the growth and market share. So particularly with the delivery of international education, it's a very competitive market. Organisations, a lot of organisations are moving away from domestic education and training in Australia, or they're diversifying out to the international market as well. But it's very competitive from that point of view. So you've got all different sorts of providers providing courses and training in this space. And you've also got competition from other countries as well, which can be challenging for organisations. Understanding and knowing where to find success can also be quite a challenge for organisations. Just knowing what's your niche, where is that need in the market, and being able to view where you are having that success and be able to build on that success. There's obviously a massive amount of opportunity, but with that opportunity, brings complexity. There's lots of places for opportunity, but there's some places where there is no opportunity where it might look like it. So the fact that it's a global market means there's some big gains to be made, but knowing how to focus in on making those gains can be a massive challenge. And profitability is the other thing. Being able to measure your profitability as you engage with the market and as you move through can always be a challenge for organisations. And a lot of the time, when courses have been delivered and students have graduated, profitability is actually not recognised until that's finished, and you may or may not find that a particular course or offering that you have may not actually have been profitable at all. So from that perspective, the convergence of all these things is, we've got a compliance burden as well, which I haven't touched on, but obviously that's there and a continuous strain for organisations to work through. There's that need to engage in a way that's meaningful and consistent with, the rest of the world and keeping up with that millennial generation. There's also growth and market share, so understanding how do you fit into the market, where are your opportunities, where do you see them? And then systems as well, so that complexity of systems, multiple systems. And this all converges to make running a business in education and training today actually quite a complex task that requires a lot of people doing what we refer to as low-value tasks, pulling data into Excel and things like that, and making the running of the business, that whole business process, quite complex. So what we're going to talk to you about is how we've actually managed some of those challenges. So what's needed from when we've gone into organisations, sometimes they're just looking for a piece of software to solve a problem that's in their business. And what it actually turns out is what they need is a platform that uncovers their entire business, that enables them to deliver their education and training from the very moment that a prospective student makes an inquiry, or an agent works with a student through an inquiry, all the way through to that enrolment, to the setting up of that course, the type of courses and qualifications you're going to deliver, and through to the other side, graduation, alumni, and then that that referral network that then starts to set up back into your organisation. Reducing operational costs, so reducing those low value tasks and making sure your people are deployed where it's going to make a big difference, and that difference is delivering a quality product to your students. And you need something that provides you with operational insights. Where am I being efficient in my business, and how can I make sure that I take those opportunities and run with them, and where am I not being efficient, and where am I not making money, and where am I not delivering the best experience for my students? So it's key that we have a system that provides that as well. And we also need a flexible system, and this is critically important, and what we sort of pride ourselves in at Fusion 5 is delivering a product that is flexible, because this market changes. I mean, with changes of government, with changes of policy, worldwide economy, different different countries being interested in our education and training sector here in Australia, you need to be able to adapt and really be able to capture those opportunities, but you're not going to be able to do that if your system isn't flexible. So now we've got some real life examples, and I'm going to introduce you to Sven Martin, who's going to talk you through some of the customers we've worked with here at Fusion 5.
Great. Well, thanks, Ben. So my name's Sven Martin, and I've sat across some of our bigger implementations of student management with our customers as the executive sponsor from Fusion 5. My aim has really been to support these organizations with what is always perceived as a massive change and the simplification of complexity, if you like. So I thought I'd share today with you two case studies or overviews of implementation, how they've been achieved, what they've achieved, and also happy to offline share more of the learnings if we only cover them at a high level in this session, but I'm happy to talk with anyone offline who's interested to go into a little bit more detail. So starting with Aspire 2. Aspire 2 is one of New Zealand's, or actually New Zealand's largest private training organisation, and they grew by acquiring 12 different organisations who focused on training, each with multiple brands. Was to actually provide consolidated training across a whole set of industries and sectors. So in terms of volumes, they have tens of thousands of enrollments going through the various brands every year, and a large portion of that, and fair to say a very important part of that, is the international sector, where they actually have agents who are placed overseas, who are managing and promoting the various courses, everywhere from things like English through to trades, and actually running the application enrollment process from overseas. So reasonably complex in that regard. They also are subject to different legislative and compliance requirements because of the multiple industries and multiple training that they deliver, and also from a domestic and international perspective, there are different compliance requirements that they need to meet. So overall, they had a reasonably complex business, and they ended up with 12 systems that they really wanted to try and gain some consolidation on. So what they decided to do is, before we actually got engaged with them, they listed out their core objectives that they required from their IT systems and platforms. And I thought I'd just summarize some of them here today, because they're very similar in terms of the themes that we see. The first one being having that integrated system across the sales process, so the actual recruitment and sales drive process, and then the rest of the student management lifecycle. Often, it's not uncommon to see those as disconnected, and that does provide challenges when it comes to getting operational insights. They wanted to centralize a lot of their operations. So because they were bringing organizations into the fold, there was huge benefits to be had by having centralized operations that could work across the different brands, and actually support that all within one platform. So traditionally, they actually had 12 SMS systems that they had to try and bring into one. They still had to manage compliance across the various 12 systems and the 12 reporting for each of the colleges and the training organizations, but they wanted to see that all in one platform. So it was a core requirement for them. And I guess that would then lead to significantly reducing the costs around the operational elements of the organizations. And that was a key driver of their whole business case in terms of how they would pull the investment together. In terms of their recruitment objectives, they really wanted to increase the effectiveness of that recruitment process. So they have a lot of metrics around what the conversion rates are from when somebody shows interest in a course through to actually enrolling in the course, and the time it takes. So having that visibility in a central system allowed them to have a lot of, or to measure that and actually try and improve that a lot. And then to supporting the stakeholders. So again, I mentioned earlier that they had agents that were supporting the international business, and they were quite reliant on those. How did they provide information and get information from those agents to, again, drive operational efficiency, reduce the double handling of data, making sure the right documents were approved and received at the same time, and just really optimizing that whole enrollment and application process. They, I've mentioned before, they had multiple legislative and compliance requirements. And that does vary between industry and also both the domestic and international market space, and they wanted to meet all of those. And that agility was important to them. So they'd brought 12 organizations into the fold. They wanted the flexibility to either add more in future, so if they were to acquire and grow that way, or even if they wanted to divest, they wanted to make it easy for them to be able to do that as well. And then lastly, it probably goes without saying, but having reporting and operational insight across the entire student lifecycle was critical. And so those were the objectives they set from an investment perspective. The next, they went to market. So they went to market to look for a number of systems. As I've mentioned, they had 12 SMS systems. They had a number of finance systems, et cetera, et cetera. And so they went to market for 5 different components. And they explored CRM. They looked at student management. They looked for student portal, the digital platform from a student portal perspective, and financial systems and document management. When Fusion 5 received some of these, we actually looked at their complete end-to-end needs, and we proposed that 3 of those components could be brought into our student management solution, and then we could leverage some of the existing financial systems and document management systems that they already had, which led us to being successful. They really liked that strategy. They liked what they saw in what we offered, and this became the architecture that we ended up implementing for them, and that they've now just in the final stages of doing a case study for. So the core components there are the people student management solution, which covered the student life cycle all the way from the recruitment right through to the advocacy and alumni stage at the end. It provided that integrated platform, and it underpinned all of the strategic goals from an operational perspective, and also the student welfare and experience perspective. And it gave them that agility. And then we integrated with their financials, payroll, and LMS solutions. And they actually liked the fact that they had some choice in those systems, because they didn't need to go too heavy hitting on some of them. And others, they could actually end up using 2 different solutions, given that they had that variability between domestic, international, and the B2B sector that they service. So that worked really well for them. So in terms of how they manage the implementation, so this has always been interesting, because from from the outset, it's perceived as a very complex change to actually put in a new student management system. And depending on the maturity and what systems you have in place or don't have in place, there's a lot of discussion to be had around how best to approach that. And so, having spent some time talking to them about that, we wanted to focus on quick wins where they could actually get some business value quite quickly, but then support the organization, build knowledge within the solution, and therefore start taking over more and more of the implementation themselves to A, reduce the cost, but B, have that internal capability so that there was confidence that the solution would support them, and that they could support themselves as they needed to in the future. So the first phase of the project was really focused on the first 2 pieces of the student life cycle, which was the ability to attract students and then enroll them. And so we just implemented those 2 modules, if you like, across the business with the agents, and provided that kind of oversight and operational visibility around the applications, the timing, the eligibility of those, and the whole enrollment process, centralization of the documentation that comes in with applications, the whole marketing process, and etc. And within 6 months, they had an ROI on that. They had achieved a go live with with that process, if you like, across the business. Had all of the inquiries, applications, and enrollments coming through the one place. There was still a manual gate at that point to hand off into the existing SMS from the actual delivery. So they had that manual gate that at that point they'd hand off into the existing SMS for the delivery and the finance. The second phase, so once they'd achieved that, the second phase was that they worked through the 3 areas in the business, so international, domestic, and the business-to-business areas, and completed the implementation of the student management lifecycle. And from our perspective, we supported them quite heavily with the first area of the business, showing them how best to configure the workflows around the completion of the enrollments, the attendance tracking, the academic and course frameworks, etc. And then they pretty much took that over from the for the other two areas of the business, having all of that knowledge internally. And within 18 months, they completed those three across the end of the student management lifecycle. And that included sunsetting some of the old student management systems, the old finance systems, having the document management storage in one place. And what that actually allowed them to do was build some momentum with and manage the change management process that goes on with having to move from a student management system. So it was done really efficiently. We're actually just in the process of finalizing a case study, so I just extracted a quote from their CFO. So there's a bit more context to this case study, which will be published soon. But you can see that they've really done well in actually achieving that cutover of multiple systems into one consolidated view across their whole end-to-end student management lifecycle and across the 12 different training organizations that they support. The next project I wanted to talk about was it was a much bigger project and a little bit different in that, but it followed the same principles. And it's interesting that we've had two projects that have taken on the same principles now and have seen success with that. So the Open Polytech are largely a distance learning provider, and they support over 30,000 students and have come from having multiple systems that support that student management lifecycle. There's more than 20, I think, in their ecosystem. It might even be higher. And so a big focus on them was, again, that same theme of significantly reducing the operational costs that go with bringing a student on board, attracting them, and actually enrolling them through. And so they needed to achieve that through automation. They needed to achieve that through better systems and that consolidated view of that journey. So in terms of their approach, interestingly, very similar approach. The big bang for buck would be had by doing the attract and enroll phase first in the first phase, having the start of the pipeline coming through the single channel, which is the new student management solution. So they started with the sales, integration with the website from an inquiry and online application perspective to complete the student enrollment process. And again, they achieved that reasonably quickly. They managed to sunset about 4 of their systems just through that, which were a mixture of bespoke build, websites holding some information, some different CRM systems holding other information, and consolidating all of that. Again, they had a manual gate which handed over the information back into the legacy student management and finance system for the remainder while they were in that phase. The next phase was then to complete the student journey again by migrating off the old student management system, migrating off the old financial system and the old student portal, and cutting across into the people solution and also the new financials. And in this case, they use Oracle Financials for that. And so we just integrated to complete that end-to-end transformation. So in terms of some of the learnings, we've actually got a bit some detailed information on how we best recommend organisations to these types of projects, because, like I said, in the offset or at the outset, they are hard to work out how best to achieve because there is a lot to do. But we've come up with these themes, and the first we'd recommend is focusing on delivering the minimal lovable product. There is a lot of complexity in what we do and what is required to be done, but there's often a lot of principles that can be kept quite simple. And we've observed that's been done really well with Aspire 2 as they consolidated 12 organisations. And the best thing is to achieve an outcome quickly. Which I guess we kind of liken to have an outcome-led approach to new process. Where you want to gain efficiencies, often you can change the process to achieve the same outcome. And we have observed that some teams can get quite stuck, especially when you're trying to get the business buy-in around that whole change management piece for implementing a new process. We've found that where we focus on what the outcome is that's required, the conversations with the business units are a lot easier because there's a common goal there to achieve an outcome, and the how is not as important as to the what needs to be achieved. And so those were principles that we've found that once we've supported our customers talk through consciously with their project teams, has actually helped decisions being made quickly. A lot of time can be lost in the debating of decisions for things that actually at the end of the day probably don't mean much, or don't have an effect, material effect around what the actual outcome is. Again, Aspire 2 did this really well. They actually empowered a core team to make decisions that knew the business well and to make decisions with consultation with the business. So they took quite a strong leadership approach in that. Again, probably because they were consolidating 12 different business processes into what would be one with an element of flavors to four. But the theme that they did really well was that they had strong leaders who were empowered to make the decision, and actually just consulted well with the business. So there was an element of consultation there. At the end of the day, the businesses were driven by an outcome, which was we want to have a much more efficient process. We want to get rid of the manual work. We want to get rid of the multiple data entry. We want to have a visibility of what we're doing. And so those two principles played well together. And it meant decisions could be made, and people were a lot more accepting of change through that process. The next we found is that having the strong vision for the solution, which can be clearly articulated to all of the different stakeholders that are going to be affected by the change, is really supported them backing the change. There's no doubt that the changes work, and most of these organizations are quite busy as it is. And so to have them understanding the purpose of that change has worked really well. And we've actually come up with some quite nice visual progress slides, if you like, which helped these organizations like Aspire to communicate how the project's tracking, which moving parts affect other moving parts. And that communication, was really important to help them switch and get the buy-in and get the effort required. Achieving quick wins. So again, you've probably seen that at a really high level, the principle of most of the implementations has been to try and get something in that adds value straight away. And in the two examples we showed today, it focus on the recruit and enrollment processes. And every time we've done that, there's been a quicker level of acceptance, because all of a sudden we're not in a 3-year project with no outcomes. We're sort of in a 6-month project, and we have an outcome, and we have visibility, and we have an improvement in our lives. And so we're always trying to look for how do we get things done quickly that add value back to the business, even though that means the whole program of work may carry on for a long time. Through that, we actually have wins that are productionized and adding value back to the business. And then the last one, again, is, we see this come up a lot, is data migration. The best is to really keep a pragmatic approach to data migration. There is a lot of data, and often data sits in multiple silos, especially if you have disparate systems. How do you link that data together? And again, we've worked well with both these two projects we've talked around here to keep a very pragmatic approach to it, because when you actually boil it down and look at the outcomes you need, there are simple ways to make sure that data migration doesn't completely overburden the entire project. And you're starting to still get value early on. So those are some of the learnings. Like I said, we've got a lot more to do that, but I tried to break them down into a few themes that have actually really had a big impact on those two projects. So I'll hand back to Ben, who's going to do a little bit more information. And as I said before, if there's any people who are interested in more information on how to justify or how to plan a migration of a solution like this, we're happy to share our learnings.
Thanks, Ben. So as we sort of talk about what Aspire 2 and Open Poly have done and the learnings they've got, the key to that system is our student management, student recruitment and student management system, so people. And one of the key aspects to that is, connecting people together, the different people involved in the education and training space, supporting them and enabling them from all perspectives, so across devices, meeting their experience expectations. And the way that we do that is to actually make sure that we make CRM and that relationship piece key to the platform, and then we wrap around that that student life cycle. So managing everything from student welfare, graduation, funding and compliance, progress management, applications and enrolment, and then that generation of the academic record. But that CRM piece that sits around that and the core platform that we've used supports all of those things, and it supports it in a number of different ways, and I'll run you through the modules shortly. But underpinning our student management system is a core application that does, the things that you would expect a system to do, but it's often missing from student management solutions because of the way that those systems have been architected historically. So they don't have good Outlook integration. They don't integrate well with websites. Their reporting tools aren't great. They don't integrate with BI systems. So that sort of functionality is core to our system, because that's the sort of thing that actually enables you to drive that engagement with both your staff, your agents, but also obviously critically prospective students and existing students. So just quickly going to run you through the modules inside the application. So recruitment's obviously critically important. So that process of going through applications and enrolments, enabling people to inquire through multiple channels, whether it's through social media, email in a response to a marketing campaign or advertising, or through your agents as well. And when you're dealing with internal staff and external staff that are helping encourage those applications enrolment, it's key to be able to measure that. So core to the application is all that pipeline and forecast management as well. Integration with external tools that enable you to do e-marketing, or the e-marketing solution that's available out of the box. And also starting to tick off some of those things during that recruitment and engagement process is, making sure you've got that language and numeracy piece or any other eligibility criteria that you have ticked off, giving your users the ability to conduct interviews and do that in a way that means you're starting to gather that core data that actually enables that initial recruitment process, but also will help drive the process further on. So we're not duplicating efforts as we continue through that student life cycle. Obviously, key then is that that contact management piece. So being able to manage contacts, regardless of who they are and what their relationship is with your organisation, capturing emails, putting them on lists so that they receive regular contact, and scheduling regular contact and making sure that that happens. Setting up action plans, basic things like integrating with Outlook are all features that are available in the application. And the ability to configure different personas within that you engage with, so that you can manage contacts. We're not just talking about student management, we're talking about agents. We might have other education institutions that we engage with or that are our partners. So being able to manage those contacts as well is really important, and is a key component, being that CRM component. And then, so not losing focus, our student management solution comes with a student portal, and a really big focus on that student portal has been that engagement piece and a student's expectations around the information that they can gather. So we've developed a student portal that gives a student, we've spent a lot of time working on this and researching this. What's the key information that a student wants to know when they log into a portal? And then what's the other information they do need access to, but it doesn't necessarily need to be front of mind. So ensuring that we're able to theme something to your organisation, ensuring that we're able to quickly and easily show that information that a student will want to see. So whether it's where they're up to with regards to their qualification, any assessments they've got coming up, and those assessments are based on how you've structured the course and the details within that course and the student's enrolment. Anything they have coming up from a schedule perspective, and they can link in and integrate with other systems to pull that data and give them that visibility as well. And then looking at what's in progress, looking at their attendance, but also critically important is the ability then to link out to other systems. So what we're not trying to do here is become a learning management system. We link out to those systems, we link out to library systems. So the student portal becomes that central place where the student can go. We talk about, obviously, key is being able to set up those frameworks and qualifications. So regardless of the sorts of qualifications you're delivering, you can either have the standard RTO type qualifications or university level qualifications, or if you've got courses that you actually deliver that are something you've created yourself, you can also set those up. The ability to have different versions of those qualifications, taking into account compulsory elements and elective elements as well, is critically important. And then managing, you might have external providers that deliver those parts of those qualifications, so you can factor that into the framework as well. And also the ability to import and export government data. So if your qualifications, authoritative qualification, then you can import that data into the system as well. Then actually setting up the courses to deliver, so scheduling courses, setting min-max values, managing venues. If you've got students that are set up and they pass for qualifications, you can auto-enroll them in those courses, managing wait lists, and also, dealing with course registrations and invoicing, certainly from an international student perspective, is critically important. And then being able to set up those courses and the delivery of those courses really is a critical component as well. So the assessment process. So in the assessment process, the ability to go into the application and tick off assessments, and a lot of this will be based on how you've structured that delivery. So how the units or competencies have been set up. You can then go through and configure that and make that part of the assessment process. So when you tick off those assessments, automatically through the system, you're seeing then the students starting to progress. So when they log into their student portal after an assessment's been completed and completed through the process, they'll see straight away how they're progressing. Key there is also the ability to integrate with the learning management system. So if part of your assessments are actually done through an LMS or through some other delivery method, you are able to integrate back into the system to complete those assessments without necessarily, a lot of the time there's a lot of manual tasks that go on. So our focus is really being on reducing those tasks. The other key thing, as you work through assessments, is understanding from a training plan perspective, delivering that qualification, how is that student progressing, understanding where students might be falling behind, and trying to re-engage them or ensure that they are actually engaged in the education that you're trying to deliver. And then obviously through that delivery process and through that setting up that qualification and assessment, you also may need to integrate with government systems from a compliance perspective as well. So what's actually happening across the entire solution here is that we're setting you up with all the different modules for that student life cycle. And then that allows you to integrate back in with your other systems that exist. And the key part of that, compliance is something that, when you're delivering education and training in Australia, compliance is, obviously critically important and can change. Compliance is really just an outcome of that student engagement and that tutor engagement and that stakeholder engagement that you've got set up through the system. So we expect that compliance is a very important outcome, but we expect that not to drive the process. What we really want to make sure that we do is that from the moment that a student makes an inquiry, whether it's through an agent or through social media, that you capture that information. And not only for the experience of that student in particular, but also enables you to analyse the success that you might bring from those students. And that tells you where you might want to focus in from a market perspective. The reporting across the entire platform is important. You're in one system, so your staff aren't having to jump around to all the different systems they might, which tends to be the way a lot of education and training organisations are forced to work at the moment. And overall, what we're finding with organisations that have implemented this system is that the engagement has been really strong, and the student experience, the experience of the staff, and their ability to focus on key high-value tasks rather than those low-value tasks has been at times even liberating for those people in that organisation. So that's the end of the webinar we have to present to you today. I hope you found that information really useful. We will be creating a recording of the webinar and sending that out to you. We will reach out to you as well and just get your feedback and understand where you're at as an organisation. And you will hear from, if you want to reach out and contact Richard Lisbon, who's one of our business development leads here in Australia in the education sector, and discuss with Richard his experience or talk more in more depth with the team and some of the stuff that Sven's talked to you about on Aspire 2, Open Poly, and even some of our Australian education customers, we would welcome you to reach out to us. Thank you for attending today. We understand that your time is valuable, and we look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everybody.